We are live. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the very first episode of Convention Conversations hosted by the Transparency Coalition. My name is Ryan Morales. I'm one of the members of the Transparency Coalition, along with the several other folks here with me today. Before we get started, I'd love to just have everyone introduce themselves and say where they're from, where they serve. So myself, I'm an Eastern Region Principal Delegate. We'll go around to Ruth.
I'm Ruth Eitmiller. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Western Stage Management Delegate.
Katrina.
My name's Katrina Michaels. I use she series pronouns, and I'm one of the Eastern Principal Delegates.
Adriana.
Hi, I'm Adriana Gaviria. I'm one of the Eastern Principal Delegates, and my pronouns are she, her.
And Josh.
Hey, he, him, but I am one of the Western Principal Delegates.
Awesome. So before we get started, I would love to give you guys a little bit of an intro to how this group got started. This was all kind of a little thought in my brain, and I brought a small group of us together to talk about, like, how do we create more transparency that's member-oriented, member-forward? And with the convention coming up, there's also a big want and desire to spend more time talking about the resolutions and proposals that are coming to the convention. And we're going to break down the whole convention in a little bit, but we only have 7 minutes on the floor to talk about each resolution. And so any opportunity we have before then to be able to meet with each other and discuss these resolutions and also get member feedback, answer member questions, it all helps us walk into the convention way more prepared, way more ready to make really meaningful decisions for the future of our union. And so after talking about it with a bunch of different people, some people on this call, some people that you'll see in future calls, we came up with this really awesome idea to host a series of daily convention conversations with different delegates popping in each day, different conversation topics, different resolutions, policies, all of that. And all of this is being streamed live so that you guys can comment, you can ask questions, you're a part of the conversation. And that's a big thing that I want to highlight today and make sure that we're highlighting each and every day, is that we want to hear from you guys. We want you to comment. We want you to ask questions. We want you to interrupt the conversations that we're having so that we can have the conversations that you want to be having, because at the end of the day, we're all here elected by our individual regions to be of service to the regions. And that's what's really brought us together. That's the central tenet of why we're here. And so also in the spirit of creating a safe and brave space, we've written a mission statement and code of conduct, which we have included on our Facebook page and our YouTube page, but we're also going to read at the beginning of today's meeting. And so Katrina, because you have the most amazing voiceover voice.
Side effect of being British.
Right.
Accountability.
Do you mind reading the code of mission statement and code of conduct for us?
No worries at all. And I think we should state that there are many other participants who are part of this coalition as well, and there'll be many other voices joining in on this conversation, because we want to make sure that we have different voices represented in the space each time. And as part of this group, we all we are all treated with equal respect as leaders engaging in these conversations. So this is our mission statement and code of conduct. The Transparency Coalition is a group of non-councillor delegates of Actors Equity Association dedicated to leadership and communication that is truly representative of our union's members. We're bringing the discussion of convention resolutions and amendments directly to members through a series of live discussions on Facebook and YouTube, allowing members to ask questions and express their support or concerns in real time. Each discussion is moderated by a non-delegate union member who will serve as an important voice of the membership. We will always strive to foster an inclusive, respectful, safe, and brave space to discuss ideas and continue learning. Our values are collaboration, curiosity, and yes-anding of one another, proposed policy, and the questions and concerns of membership. We are committed to creating an environment that is rooted in respect so that we can productively create and sustain this brave, safe space to discuss complicated issues. We will always extend that respect to members watching, and we seek the same in return. What we ask is that both is that both the members engaging in conversation with us and the delegates themselves hold these two agreements. 1, speak from the I. 2, confront confusion or discomfort with curious questions. And while we are happy to engage in constructive debate, we view harassment and discrimination as a clear threat to free expression and participant safety, and as such, they will not be tolerated. We ask that the members who engage with us give us the grace to not always know or to get it wrong sometimes. Anytime we don't know the answer to a question, we recognize it as an opportunity to search for information or clarity. I don't know are 3 of the most powerful words there are, followed closely by, let me find out. We bring you this series of convention conversations not only to have meaningful dialogue with current and future members, but to learn more ourselves about the important policies of our union and to enhance our ability to serve as trusted liaisons for our fellow union members.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Katrina. I enjoyed that. That was great.
It's a good thing I do audiobooks.
Right. If anybody needs a voiceover actress, we just a small ad.
That's
for
really
Katrina
why we're having
Michaels.
this conversation, to market my
Well, great. So the beginning part of this conversation is going to be a little bit talking at. We just want to take this opportunity to inform members from the delegate experience, but also just from a bit of like a breakdown of what the convention is. We're a couple weeks out, what's going on, and then of course, please answering any questions that come up to the best of our abilities. Again, we are all members of this process, and it's a new process, so we're learning too. But we do want to share some of our experiences and what we've learned about what we're hoping to accomplish in the convention. So the convention was originally created as part of the Equity 2020 referendum, where all members voted on that. It was passed with 79% support. Prior to the referendum, Actors Equity Association was governed solely by the National Council, which is made up of council members from the 3 regions. You have your Eastern region, your Central region, and your Western region. In creating the National Convention, the referendum attempts to break the bones of the old governance system and put more decision-making power into the hands of the membership. Now, we're going to jump into this topic a little bit because I know that that's the intent of that is something that maybe doesn't follow through 100% with how it actually comes about, because we'll get into a little bit about how this affects membership meetings, what the actual powers of the convention are, and also what this does to the regions. Those are some talking points we're going to have some more conversation about in a bit. So I want to highlight that we're going to go to that part soon. But what the convention does do is it allows for a larger amount of representatives from each region, so that we have, the numbers are 100 regional delegates and 28 regional liaison delegates from our 28 liaison cities, who traditionally didn't have nearly the size of a voice as they currently do in governance. So it really does create a lot more voices in the room, especially outside of New York City, which our union traditionally and historically has been very New York City centric. Oh, and a fun fact, the Equity 2020 referendum also created the 9 at-large council positions. So the at-large council positions, you have your councilor positions in the East, West, and Central, and we've got our office city in each. There's New York, Chicago, LA. So the 9 at-large council positions require that those positions come from folks who live outside of our office cities. So this referendum really did address or help to address that we have more regional representation, more representation from outside DC. Something else, another fun fact to know is that in other national unions, including most of our sister unions, they hold a national convention, which is considered to be one of the highest forms of representative democracy in a national union. So there's a lot of precedent for this decision that we made. Yes, I see someone raising their hands. Logan, one of our at-large Eastern councilors from Orlando. So delegates are able to help in other unions establish national policy for the union and then carry that vision back to their local area. I think something to think about is that all of our national councilors are elected from the national membership at large, whereas each of the delegates are just elected from the regions. So anyone in the East votes only for the Eastern delegates. Anyone in the Central only votes for Central. Anyone for the West only votes for West. So we are able to more better, right? I'm talking. We're better able to really respond to the needs of our membership because we're directly elected from that particular region. Moving on. So when is the convention?
Can I just raise one subject?
Yeah, raise it.
Just to give some context to this referendum, which was in 2019 as part of the Equity 2020 campaign. There were two items on the referendum. The other was on removing a cap on working dues, which also passed with around 78-79%. And it is important to note that around 11,500 members voted on this referendum, which is actually, I know that can sound low in a 51,000 person union, but was markedly higher. The council election right before that was only 8,000 votes. So it was actually a lot of members engaged in this voting process.
Awesome. Thanks, Katrina. So one reason why we started doing these conversations today is because the convention's actually on April 25th. That's why we're doing daily videos so that we can try to hit as much of convention policy as possible to really help ourselves, as we said earlier, get a better handle on it, have conversations about it, but also inform you guys. It goes for 3 days. I believe we got like 7 hours a day on Zoom, which is going to be really fun. And the people who attend the convention, the delegates, are the 83 council members, which includes all of our officers, 100 regional delegates, and then the 28 liaison delegates who come specifically from the 28 different liaison areas. Who are the delegates? We've covered this a little bit, but I'll just cover it again. These are members from the applicable region and working category. So you've got principal delegates, chorus delegates, and stage manager delegates. The numbers were split by region based on working weeks. I believe that's correct. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. They're split by working weeks. So that's how we got the spread of the 100 regional delegates and the numbers that come from the East, the West, Central, and also stage manager, chorus, and principal. So delegates are elected for a 2-year term. We have a really awesome opportunity because moving forward, the convention will only be held every 2 years. But for our first conventions, we're having one this year and one next year. So all of the delegates who are speaking right now, who are going to be at the convention, will have the opportunity to do a full second convention before they need to be reelected, which means that these kinds of conversations are super important because they also give us the opportunity to plan ahead for next year. So anything we maybe come across that we missed in creating policy this year is a really great opportunity to create better and more exacting policy for next year. So that's another big reason why we wanted to have these conversations. Great. That's like the general. Am I missing any like major bullet points about the facts and figures of the union before I jump to the next little bit of conversation, guys?
I mean, it's useful to know that for anyone who's considering being a delegate in the future, there aren't too many requirements. You have to be a member in good standing. You have to be over 18, not being conflict of interest, which is in our bylaws as a term if you're an employer member. You can't be under fine or suspension, meet the resident requirement. And then there's also an employment requirement. So I'm, for instance, an Eastern principal delegate. To be a principal delegate, you have to have worked at least 2 contracts as a principal member or one which is over 10 weeks. So there's a couple requirements, but not that many in the scheme of things.
And it's only a 2-year term.
Yes.
Awesome. And we're almost to the first like conversation topic, I promise. Now, as we get into, we want to talk a little bit about the authority of convention, but in order to lay that out, I just want to talk very briefly about what exactly we're doing at this convention. If you're like, what's a convention? You may not have really heard about what exactly we're going to be doing. Are we just going to be talking and sharing ideas? Are we going to pass actual hard policy? What are the bounds around that policy? What are the limits? What can that policy create? And that's kind of the next section we want to get into. What we'll be doing at the convention alongside some meetings, discussing one another. The main purpose and the most amount of time we'll be spending is looking at policy. So there's 2 kinds of policy we'll be looking at. There's constitutional amendments, where we can actually amend most parts of the Constitution, not all parts, but many parts of the Constitution as a convention. And then there's resolutions. Resolutions are pretty wide, have a pretty wide scope. We could do anything from asking, one of our favorite resolutions we like to talk about when we're using resolution examples is like every equity member must get a puppy, right? We could do something as far reaching as asking that all members get puppies, to asking that we consider changing certain audition systems, or asking that we can make grand statements of what we as a union stand for. There's a lot of depth and breadth to what we can make a resolution on, and very little oversight of what we can actually put. Where it gets tricky and where we're navigating this year is when we talk about what convention actually has the authority to do. And so convention, as it's written, has the authority and responsibility to approve resolutions, including those sent as advisory to council, which we'll get to in a second, for their consideration and action, and approve recommendations to council regarding spending of funds. They can't actually spend funds, but we can recommend a spending of funds, approve amendments to the Constitution, and something we can do unilaterally is increase dues or initiation fees, which we have not voted to do in this. there's no resolutions for that, so don't worry about that. So what has been interesting to try to figure out is this piece of advisory to council, because council has certain responsibilities, and what the convention cannot do according to the bylaws of the Constitution is we can't interpret the Constitution and bylaws, we can't adopt financial plans or budgets, we can't make decisions on partnering with other organizations, we can't call strikes, issue do not work orders, we can't submit a referendum vote, we can't make employment decisions regarding the executive director, we can't adopt or oversee organizing strategies, we can't appoint Equity League pension and health fund trustees, we can't establish committees or approve committee members, and we can't handle disciplinary appeals. Now that still gives, like I said, it gives us a lot of weight and breadth. And before we get too much into the weeds of where this conversation is going to go as far as what this leaves us to in the convention, something I think that we don't talk about enough, especially, look, I'm a member from New York City. I know Katrina is as well. Adriana, you are as well. I'm remembering that correctly, right? And I want to kind of rewind the conversation a little bit. We've got Josh and Ruth, who are both from the West here. And something that's been really exciting, I know for me personally, and I'm sure for you guys as well, has been being able to have all of these conversations and create this bigger and bigger voice for stage managers, for people outside of New York City. And I wanted to talk, before we get into the weeds about advisory to council and what we can accomplish as a convention, I'd love to take a minute to hear from both of you guys and have a unified conversation about why this is such a big deal. Why is this such a huge opportunity? And I realize that's a general start to the question, but maybe we can get both of you guys to weigh in and we can take the conversation from there.
I feel like for my sake, I'm a little of a I'm a hybrid delegate in the sense that I spent almost 17 years in New York, and then I moved out here at the time that the convention was sort of becoming part of the existence. So I got elected here in the West, but I've only worked in the West consistently for the last 2.5, 3 years. And of course the pandemic hit right after all this started. So it's just been an odd time. But even in that process of running here in the West, one of the challenges to me was, do you understand the issues that the West faces? Because our fear is that the last thing we want is more, of the New York voice taking over our Western seats. And I completely, hear that. And this is part of what the convention is going to hopefully be best at, is bringing a lot of voices to the forefront that have not otherwise had a solid ground to stand on. So that is part of our work, is making sure that we're all bringing as many voices to the table as possible. And just from the pre-convention work that's been done, and I know a lot of us have been in the trenches of this for the last year, that has been such a push. And it's not always comfortable, it's not always easy, but the fact that work is happening and people are trying to make sure everyone is represented and the voices are heard, I feel like is a testament to what this was designed for. And obviously these numbers are breaking that down, making sure each region and the liaisons have a seat at that table. So that's what I'm seeing right now at this point.
I will start off by calling out Rebecca's comment in the feed, that the numbers that were used to determine delegate representation is actually based on the population in each region, the population membership, not on work weeks. So whether you are working or not, you are counted as one of the members who needs to be represented in that region. I'm up in the Seattle area, and I've been up here for about 10 years. Seattle is kind of a unique place because we are not an office city, but we have over 500 members actively working in the area. And there's a lot of feelings from the past about kind of being dismissed. And one of the really exciting things like we've said, is that we do have an actual seat at the table. We have representation. Seattle's kind of unique in this convention because it just so happens to fall that we have our Seattle liaison delegate, but I am just a Western region stage manager delegate who happens to be from Seattle. So it's exciting that we have, like I said, more of a voice. And we're already seeing that there's more engagement from people because they feel like there is a way to speak up and be heard that's different from speaking up at a membership meeting, especially, again, for those of us who don't live in an office city and who, until membership meetings were offered via Zoom, had never attended one before.
What has your experience been? For some background for folks, we've been able to have a lot of really awesome conversations over Zoom. There's been a lot of like different working groups. I know in the West, you guys have a working group that has been doing a lot of speaking, especially like in as well as in Central. There have been all different working groups based on different issues. So there's been a lot of conversation that's happened. And I'm curious, and this is really a question for anyone, like what your experience has been being able to work with members from other regions. What have you learned? What has become something that maybe you never would have known if we hadn't had this opportunity to really connect and understand the needs of members outside of our own bubble?
I can speak partly because, for example, Logan is here. I'm not sure if he's still here, but Logan working down, he's worked on Disney contracts for a long time as an equity member. I did not know until he or some of his colleagues put together a resolution. I did not know that when we were putting together contracts for Disney, that we were doing it without consulting anybody who had worked on Disney contracts. Which makes it purely theoretical. When there are boots on the ground that we can bring in and call to the table. Yeah, and Logan is from Seattle too. He came from that market, so he's the jack of all trades down there. But seeing stuff like that, and engaging with that stuff is like, oh, some of this is just eye opening. Stuff that I've never worked on a Disney contract. I have not really thought about who is putting those contracts together or how that's being done. So to kind of open up and see the sausage factory is sort of important, because now we can all be like, oh yeah, that does not make any sense, we should totally do that. It's just stuff as simple as that has been pretty cool to see happening.
Thanks, Josh. And Ruth?
Yeah, I'll chime in. For me, it's been really cool to be part of both Western region committees, working groups, and some of the national delegate conversations that we've had, because it's encouraging to see the similarities between the issues that we face in Seattle and issues that are kind of universal regionally, especially because in the Western region, we have a lot of the smaller contracts. And so realizing that we're facing the same struggles and then going into some of those more national conversations, bringing those issues up and hearing that is not an issue, or that is not even the protocol in the Eastern region specifically, and in the Western region as well. But to see that there can be such unity around a problem and that has not even ever been brought up as a conversation topic somewhere else. And I think that that's been really encouraging for all of us to hear each other's experiences before getting to the convention, before being faced with a resolution that you just have to vote on based on your own experience, to hear why this is actually an issue, why you might think that it doesn't need to be changed, but once you've heard from 10 different people who struggle with this on every contract, you're going to think differently before making that vote.
That's great. I mean, I'll just speak briefly on that because I feel like it's kind of all any of us are asking for is that time that we get to spend getting to know each other and getting to really understand not just like words on a page, but the person that it affects behind the words. And I know from my experience, having been fortunate enough to have the time and the space to be in a lot of these rooms and hear a lot of this conversation, like how easily my mind has been changed about anything that if I had just made a decision on my own knowledge, on what I know, what I think, how much I would have missed someone else's experience. And I feel like that's been so important for me when we talk about areas, anyone outside of the New York City sphere, when we talk about stage manager issues, all of that has been incredibly eye-opening. And that's part of, honestly, not to keep promoting this thing we're doing right now, but that's what's so exciting about me to be able to doing this, is being able to take these conversations to membership who might not ever really get to sit down with their stage manager, because usually there's only one, maybe two, and really have a conversation with them about like, hey, what's going on in your world that I don't understand, or not really knowing what's going on in the regions, especially people who live and work in those regions. So I'll get off my soapbox for a second, but Katrina, Adriana, did you want to chime in on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the exciting thing for me is, well, it's that process of you can't effectively engage and shift things if you don't have the fundamental awareness. And as we're a diverse national union, and everyone has different needs, different experiences. And I think it's been fascinating coming into conversation with people who are, every delegate, it's a volunteer position. Everyone has dedicated time and energy to do this. And there's so much passion for this work. And I think ultimately a common theme is, well, I guess speaking from an I don't want to speak for people. I want to make sure I'm representing people and making sure their voices can almost speak for themselves in spaces. And part of that is actually just like spending the time to listen to those needs, especially as I'm New York City based, but I mainly actually work around the country until COVID hit. So I get to hear snippets of experiences, but really kind of centering them and framing it in a solution-oriented way is an exciting process that I've loved engaging on.
Yeah, and I was just going to quickly say that as many of us do, a lot of us do work the regional theater circuit, and so we end up establishing these really strong bonds to different communities. And for the first time, we're really able to support our colleagues who live in those areas, and really get behind them in issues that are important for that specific community. And also for me personally, it's always been really difficult to go to any meetings or to carve out that time because a lot of us work during the day or we have different schedules. So having this accessibility online virtually has been amazing. And not only to be able to go to meetings specific to the region where you supposedly are based, but I mean, we're living in a world where we're traveling all the time and we're constantly working in other markets. So I find it, for me specifically, very important to be in tune with the issues that are happening all over, because it does affect all of us. And it's been really great meeting everyone from all over.
This is awesome. I always have such a crush on you guys when we have these conversations. And I'm gonna just say that publicly. I love you all. I'd love to shift the conversation over to the big thing that I teased earlier, which is talking about, if anyone watched Katrina's amazing videos where she spoke through all of the policy that's upcoming in the convention, and that was a massive undertaking, and claps for Katrina on that. You probably noticed a certain phrase quite frequently, which is advisory to council, or convention recommends that council, etc. And so we ran into an interesting issue that I don't really think anyone anticipated. I know that counselors were just as surprised, or former counselors were just as surprised as we were, of this thing that's come up where we have this first convention, and based on the specific language in our constitution, I'd say approximately 80%, if not more, of what we've written has gone advisory to council. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what that experience has been, why that happened. I'm happy to chime in, but I think we've all talked about this in our private circles enough that I think it would be great to have instead of me just reading a bunch of stuff on a page, actually have a conversation about what we've learned about what happened with that. I will just kind of preempt and say there's already a solution in place, and we're going to talk about that too. So this is less of a bitching session and more of just talking about what that means and how we might be able to have a meaningful conversation about how to improve this in the future, and what it currently says about what the convention can do, what it currently says about what the council can do, and where we all might find that line can be drawn. And this is a great opportunity, folks who are listening. If you have thoughts about this as we're talking, please jump in, because this is not intended to be the end all be all of this conversation, but a space for said conversation. So let's start kind of simple. What does it mean for something to be advisory to council?
So rather than, a resolution being like, we move that, like, we be it resolved, we do this. Well, it can't be explicitly mandated. Instead, it can be a recommendation to council. And so if that resolution is approved, if it's voted on at the convention, and if it's a regular resolution, it's a majority vote. If it's a constitutional amendment, it is 2/3 have to vote in favor of it. But so let's say it's a regular resolution, it receives a majority vote. Rather than that just becoming equity policy, it would then go to council and actually at council, while this year with our virtual space, we won't be having amendments on the floor, which means that anything we're voting on, we're not changing the verbiage right there, debating the specific words. You're either saying yes or saying no, and we'll have 7 minutes to debate the actual, the idea, but not the specific language. If it is advisory, if it's voted in favor, it will go to council. They'll debate it. They can possibly amend it as well, but ultimately it will not become policy unless it is then voted in favor of at council.
Great. Anyone want to add anything to that?
I'll just add some background that a lot of these resolutions started out as statements, and we were given an opportunity to send our resolutions through legal review in advance of the convention, because if they were deemed to be out of order during the convention, then they could not be debated and voted on. So when a lot of these resolutions went through legal counsel, that's when they came back to the writers with the recommendation that they be written as advisory to council, or they would be ruled out of order.
Great. And my next question is, like, when is it beneficial for something to be advisory to council, or when does that feel like the right, not trying to go too much into right or wrong, this isn't a well-phrased question, but when is it for the benefit of the union, for the benefit of the membership, that certain things that convention passes be advisory to council?
That's a great question, Ryan, and it's something that I also had a question about, because when I became a delegate, learning all this, like a lot of us too, it's like learning a whole new language, a whole new vocabulary, and trying to really figure out, okay, this is what I want to happen, but now there's this language that I have to use in order to put it forth. And so that is a question that I had. How do you frame what you want to do as an advisory to council, and when do you not? So I don't have the answer to that. From my experience when I was writing my resolutions, or when I was helping my colleagues with theirs, it made sense because as a delegate, as part of the convention, we don't have the power to make these happen, but council has a fiduciary duty. They are the ones that are able to make these things move forward to the next level. And so in writing these, we had to use that language in order to send it to the next step. Now, is that the only way that things can move forward? I don't know. I think this is a learning curve for all of us. This is the first convention. This is an opportunity to see what are the things that work and what are things that don't work. But we are operating under a certain set of rules, right? That have been established. And so how do we move through these rules, and what are the rules that are working for us, and what are the rules that are not?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll state my question again. Like, when do we think it's good for something to be advisory to council? Like, when do we think it's beneficial for both us as delegates, the council, the membership, what are there like pretty clear cut things from our understanding thus far that feel like, yeah, I would want to make that advisory to council, or I totally understand that is best served being advisory to council. I ask that just because I think it's interesting to start from that end of the spectrum as we have a conversation about what all of this means, both for this convention and moving forward.
Some of this I don't know that we know yet, and I think this is we are sort of the guinea pigs on this. We are on the front line, and I suspect everyone here has a vested interest, given the name of this coalition, that we are very interested in transparency, and we're very interested in what becomes of all of these recommendations over the next few months. Because if we find that all those recommendations are, oh, that's nice, and then put into the circular filing cabinet, then that will be probably, the grounds upon which we build next year's convention. So, I mean, and I feel like the transparency issue is an attempt to say, great, if we are making these recommendations, how do we know that it's best serving the community by keeping them in the form of a recommendation? And I would like to extend the generosity and grace to council to give them the opportunity to operate within these parameters, and to show the convention and the members at large that that they are going to take these to heart, and they're going to do everything in their power to manifest the changes that are asked in these resolutions, even though they are technically only recommendations. I think they do carry weight, and I suspect the council is on board for that. But this transparency idea is so critical, because that's how we will know. So I put a pin in it and say I'm comfortable right now going forward with those parameters and that understanding. And if we find 3 months, 6 months from now that this is problematic, then I think that's the time to really open the Pandora's box and say, okay, then if this isn't working, what next?
I also think an interesting thing to factor in is the question of, how, because of our limited time at the convention, because you asked when does it serve for something to be advisory? And there is this trickiness with the 7 minutes to debate a motion. How can we make sure that this language is truly representing all, truly serving all? Can we really pick apart in a nuanced fashion? And I will say so many delegates have been coming together, and with the awareness that we have limited time, the amount of pre-work that has been done and the amount of working groups is really astounding. And the language was, so we were able to upload our resolutions from March 1st to March 12th, and we had to gain the necessary signatures then. And language could still be amended then. And I know people were reaching out to each other then to make sure that we do maximize these conversations. But to the discussion of advisory, it is tricky if, people went above and beyond to have those conversations in advance, but those weren't, required. And if the only requirement is a 7-minute conversation to create policy, that can be an extremely daunting prospect for covering a large subject. So that's not so much, I guess, speaking to why or when advisory, but just given certain confines, it can be in play. I think one thing that is really important is making sure that everyone is given a clear and consistent interpretation of when and what would fall under advisory, because I think a lot of stickiness can just get into the lack of awareness or knowledge, and that also complicates, it creates a complicated notion of like, what is my function, my role as a delegate? How can I best serve this community as a delegate? Because that is a key player that determines the role.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that, because I think something that Advisory to Council has done, or seems to have done, is allow us to blue sky dream in a different way. I've been in a lot of meetings the past couple of days, because so for the people watching, we had our resolutions were due on a certain date that I don't have in my brain, and then it was 45 days out from the convention, and then we have a resolutions committee whose job it is to set the agenda, to double check to make sure everything works for the floor, isn't going to get called out of order. And they also, in acknowledgement of how limited time we have, they've been working really hard to combine or recommend combinations of resolutions. Not a single resolution writer has to actually combine, but they've been recommending it. So I've been in a couple meetings the past several days with a couple of different groups, large groups. There was one, I think in two of them, my resolution got combined with 2 or 3 other resolutions that were similar with different things. But one big theme I noticed was a willingness to kind of hedge our bets and accept that maybe there's one thing in the resolution that isn't on my wish list, but I get that it's on yours, and we can trust that since this is all advisory to council anyway, there's a higher chance of it passing because we recognize this is not the end all be all of this thing. And it actually does give us an opportunity to blue sky dream in a way. And so I'm riffing on this. This is a very new thought for me, but it makes me wonder if there isn't some benefit, even in future conventions, if and when the all this is clarified, to intentionally making something on recommendation to council, even if the convention could pass it, because you don't want the convention to decide, or because you want the opportunity to blue sky dream and you want someone to vet it. I don't know if there's much weight to that, but I will say, like, the what's the word? Something is the necessity of need. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. It's the mother of invention or whatever, that phrase.
Yeah, one of those phrases. The fact that
necessity is the mother of invention. I think that is the phrase.
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
Necessity is the mother. I think that's it. I think what it's done is it's changed how the dialogue has been leading up to the convention, where we're not really going through the resolutions, and I'll be interested to see how these conversations go, because I don't know how much we'll really go through the resolutions with a fine-tooth comb, because we don't have the final say. So if I don't 100% agree with that, well, I'm going to trust that that'll go through council and maybe get weeded out or get refined into a better version of that idea. Whereas if we're the final say and we only have 7 minutes to debate it, how much harder does it get? Is it to just vote yes on something that seems like a good idea, but we haven't had the chance to maybe get all the facts straight on it, or haven't had the full chance to discuss it? So I think it's, this is neither here nor there, but I think it's created some interesting problems and solutions with it all.
Sure, I think it can be a balance. It's a balancing act with it creating added possibility, but also there's the wariness that you want things to actually be actionable and create change. And advisory it's another step to actually get things changed. And it's another step that can be behind a closed door and doesn't necessarily include all of our members and their voices. So I think it can be both in a way.
Absolutely, yeah. Great. I'm enjoying this conversation. So
I think one of the other things that it does too, sorry, Ryan, is, and I'm kind of formulating this thought into words as I speak it, so apologies. But I think it removes a certain level of competition. Not that there is a sense of competition, but that we as delegates don't have to determine which resolution is more important than another. For example, I'm going to use like a super basic example. If there are 3 resolutions that involve spending money, and we don't know the union's budget, we don't know if all 3 can be affordable, but we don't have to factor that into our decision about passing each of these resolutions. We don't have to make sure that all of these can happen. We just say, yes, we support that, we think that should happen. And then council can, look at the budget, determine, reset priorities, talk to people, further that. So it removes that onus on us to make sure that we word that ours is more important than any other one, if that makes sense.
And I feel like it adds to accessibility too, right? What's great about the system is, this is a group of rather engaged delegates. I've seen all of your faces a number of times before. We've had so many conversations and it's been great. But if you have one thing that you want to accomplish as a delegate, you can write that resolution. You don't need to get a BFA in major law, in labor law. You don't need to try to track down all the budgets and all the line items and figure out exactly how it's going to work. You don't have to learn all of equity systems. You can literally say, no, I want to be a delegate. I want to have a voice. I'm going to spend my bit of time, refine this one idea I have. And there are a lot of people who have really done that. and I don't need to have it all figured out. I feel like it does help create a wider pool of ideas instead of the onus being on every idea needing to be 100% fully cooked in order for us to insert that into the conversation. To segue a little bit, because this will be our first discussion around a resolution. We have actually, as I hinted at the beginning, this is already in process, a potential fix for this, or I would say a clarification. In fact, the resolution is clarifying the authority of the convention that's been sent in for it got its signatures. It's on its way to the floor, we believe. And so this is already being talked about. This is already a conversation, which is why I pushed to talk about this today, because I think it's a really important conversation for us to have out front of.
Can I just make a little clarification?
Yeah, please.
We don't know it. So just to give logistical stuff, all resolutions had to be uploaded onto our delegate portal between March 1st and March 12th. To move forward, they had to get the necessary number of signatures for a resolution. That's 10%, which 21 delegates, or for constitutional amendment, that's 20% or 42. It then went through, they're right now going through committee, as Ryan mentioned, some of them are being consolidated. After that, our chair, which is Kate Shindle, and our parliamentarian will go through and look if any are out of order. Something will be out of order if it's not in line with the laws of this country, or or the laws of equity. And the committee, the resolutions committee, will be putting forward an agenda for us. We don't specifically know what will make it to the floor at this point, and even something we might run out of time, and something that we attempt to have on the agenda might not make it to the floor. So there's no reason at this point why this motion wouldn't make it to the floor, but just not guaranteeing that it will.
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks. Always appreciate the clarification. We're doing this live, folks. So this resolution is called Clarifying the Authority of the Convention, and I think the title speaks pretty well for itself. There's a piece of it that I just want to highlight. We're not going to bore you guys with having posting the language here, because we'd be bored by that. So we're not going to bore you with it. But there is a part of it that recommends that we offer the broadest let's try that English again. That we offer the broadest possible interpretation of the convention's authority, which I think is interesting, because it interplays well with the conversation we're having of being curious about where that lands. And what do you guys think, as far as the conversation we've had so far about that seems to me, at least from a reading of it and from being familiar with it, of one of the big asks of the resolution, of really expanding the authority of the convention compared to where it is right now, where the vast majority of resolutions have been sent as advisory to council. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it is interesting in our Constitution, Article 4. Wait, I don't know this off by heart. Article 4, Section 2, is that, the authority is adopting resolutions. And so if the rules are so, in the discussion of how we interpreting the authority, if the scope is so limited, we're not truly actually adopting resolutions at the convention, in a way where everything is advisory to adopting resolutions. So I think it's an interesting question of how do we look at the definitions of what purely falls under the confines of council, but still allows, as our Constitution says, that the authority of the convention shall not be limited, is included but not limited to adopting resolutions.
Yeah, that's a great point. The difference between the language there. Language is so important, and that's ultimately what we spend a lot of nerdy time doing, is figuring out well, what does this fully express this sentence, and how do we interpret it? Any other thoughts about this resolution, about those specific words, or how the potential voting on of this resolution might affect the conversation we've had thus far?
No, I just think that council will be equally equally interested in clarifying this. So I really think that it's just, and again, we're the first round of this, and it's just about hammering down some of these details. But I think everybody collectively wants that to happen, and I think it will. I think I'm pretty sure. I don't know. You might know the numbers more than I do, but I feel like that was one that was heavily supported. And I think that's for good reason. So I have high hopes.
I think ultimately it serves everyone. Because the problem is, if everything is advisory to council, that puts an overwhelming burden on council then to deal with all of these resolutions in a timely fashion, as they're also responding to the many things that go on in day-to-day life, not to mention as we look to reopening, etc. There's a lot on the plate, even as they have a meeting once a month for 4.5 hours. So I think it serves council not to put undue burden, and I think it also serves members in truly having their voices included in a way that is actually actionable and in a timely fashion too. Especially looking at, we are shifting our model with membership meetings. Beforehand, they were just in Chicago, LA, New York, twice a year. Any rank and file member could make a motion, and if it was approved, it would then go to it would be advisory to council, essentially what we have at the convention with a lot. And so as we shifted, and I think it is so important that we did make a shift in general, because in some ways we had like direct access for some. What I want to be careful of is not then having indirect access for all, and that we actually make ways that these voices are truly represented. And so having the convention be able to be actionable, to have direct consequence effects right there and then, I think serves everyone in governance and beyond governance as well.
Ruth,
I'm gonna add something, a little shout out to all those people that are watching who are asking, we have a constitution? So, because that's where I was whenever I didn't even know that we had a constitution. And there is, and that's what's been really exciting about working with so many delegates from all over the country, is just that we're all at different levels. And then not only that, but in writing these resolutions, this is how detailed this is how detailed delegates got, even looking word for word at the Constitution that we have and seeing where is it that needs to be updated, what needs to change, and even focusing on, this is a new, very new for us. This is the first convention that Equity has ever had. But even looking at the rules that were created last year, or that are there for us now, and I love that. I love that everyone was so detailed about really looking at what can be changed and what needs to be updated. But yes, for anyone who, this just blew their minds that we have a constitution, there is a constitution, and this is a great way to learn more about the inner workings of the union. And a lot of us, didn't know a lot, and you just learn by doing and asking other people. There are other members who have far more experience, and they were very open to just answering questions and getting together and really explaining things. So I'm just putting that out there, that if you did not know, that I was there with you as well.
And Ruth put the link for the Constitution and the bylaws. Thank you, Ruth, an awesome stage manager. I've had the privilege of working with myself, and one of your counselors as well. So if you are looking on Facebook right now, there is a link for you with our current Constitution and bylaws, which were shifted based on that referendum in 2019.
And for those not watching on Facebook, that is part of the documents that are on the member portal. So that is also easily accessible from there. And I'll just put a quick plug in about not knowing things and asking questions. That's part of what we want to do with this series too. So please, at any point in any episode, throw a question in the chat. We will do our best to answer it. we want to help remove those barriers of like not understanding what's going on.
And it helps us. I've said the wrong thing multiple times, and Katrina's jumped in. We had Rebecca Prescott from the chat jump in. We're all learning on the job very much. And so even just this opportunity to get to be out in front and have these conversations and be, I don't know, like lovingly held accountable for what we're talking about and what we're saying and what we've learned and sharing that. They always say like the best way to learn is to teach. So there's an element of that too, where we're able to come and share what we've learned in our experiences, and not only with each other on this call, but the people listening. And so I don't know, I'm just gonna keep geeking out about this in this experience, and being really grateful for all y'all. So it sounds like, to kind of wrap up the conversation, unless anyone has anything they wanted to say about the resolution, it sounds like there's a lot of good talking points about how this is really beneficial to everyone as a whole, from our members to our delegates to council, staff, everyone involved. It will helping to clarify the authority of the convention will really create better systems for everyone. That's the gist of what I'm hearing. Anybody else have anything they want to add or put in there?
Just adding that, like, while I've made my personal views on it clear, please, as members, if you feel differently, reach out. The fact that's part of why we're having these conversations. This is not about us selling an idea or selling our opinions. We will openly share our opinions because it's important that you hold us accountable, that we give tools to debate in this. But a really important factor is that you share your questions, your concerns, because I promise you, we actively want to listen and we want to factor in. And speaking for myself, I know that anything I vote on, it is not my vote, it is your vote. And so please pipe in with any questions, comments, concerns, always.
Yeah, and like Katrina was saying, you know, we're a group who's come together to make these videos. So nothing that we're trying to say is the Transparency Coalition supports this resolution. There's 5 of us on this call. We're talking about what we're seeing. We're getting each other's perspectives. We're learning from that, and ultimately, all of us are going to walk away with our own viewpoints on the resolutions that we do talk about, the amendments we talk about, and they may or may not reflect what the full conversation is, but we're here to learn. We're not here, like Katrina said, to sell anyone a bag of goods. Well, great. We've got a couple minutes left in the stream. I just want to, first of all, thank everyone who's joined us today, our amazing panelists. All 4 of you guys have been great. Thanks for letting me muddle through hosting this. And Ruth did a lot of, I just want to call out Ruth, who has been a fucking rock in all this. She did a lot of the research on the back end for this episode. Because we wanted to bring a lot of information, had a lot more talking at and a lot more research than they will in the future. Also, this will be hopefully the last time you'll have one of us moderating. The plan is moving forward that each day the moderator is a non-delegate. We really want to bring the voice to the membership, and we know there's a lot of really awesome members out there who are trained in some level of organizing or facilitating conversations or moderating. And so we've actually already got a really great lineup through the rest of the week of different delegates. But if you're listening to this and you are like, oh my gosh, I would love to help lead one of these conversations and talk about some cool resolutions and amendments and whatnot, reach out to us. You can reach out to us via the Facebook or the YouTube, the contacts there. And we would love to have you on board to help lead one of these conversations. So with that said, these will be going every single day until April 24th. April 24th will be the last one, because on April 25th, we'll be in convention for 3 days. You have all of our names. You can find our contact information on the website. I will post that somewhere, or we'll post that somewhere so that it's an easy link to not make you have to navigate it, because I would have to like poke around to find it myself. But please reach out to us if you have thoughts left over from listening to this. If you're listening to the replay and you want to input something, comment on the video or reach out to any of us individually. We'll share it with each other if you've got a really awesome thought. We definitely want to have our ears open, even as we are the ones up here doing a lot of the talking. So that said, am I missing anything?
Tomorrow's episode, Thursday, April 8th, is going to stream at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're going to start to talk about some of the constitutional amendments that specifically address how some of the things we talked about today might change.
Amazing, amazing. And we'll have our very first non-delegate moderator here tomorrow. So I'm super excited for that, and we'll see you guys then. In the meantime, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.